Hello and welcome to Nashville Savvy. I'm your host, Megan Lee Pitseedlick. I'm happy to be back at it. We had a crazy week because it was the first Metro Council meeting with the new Metro City Council. More than almost half of it is brand spanking new. They are still learning the ropes. And so we're going to go through the first council meeting. We're also going to touch on something a little bit cute for fall that you might want to do because I just discovered it this week. And of course, our Metro Mayhem, which is more than easy to do because council's back in session, baby. So let's hop right into it. So during the council meeting on Tuesday, which, starts at around 6:30, it started right on the dot. It was in the Metro City Courthouse, as it always is. If you've never stopped by one, I mean, it's pretty boring, but you should at some point, if you are civically responsible, stop in the building and check it out. But of course, we have a new vice mayor. So Angie Henderson, our new vice mayor, was the one who was presiding over the council meeting. And this is a little bit of a different flavor than Jim Schulman, who was the former vice mayor. And by a different flavor, I just mean Jim Schulman had a very calming presence. He was very, I don't know, I don't want to call him reserved, but he held control with the fact that he was just so calm and peaceful. The council meeting had a few hiccups as usual. We had tech problems, which we thought were going to be all fixed. I mean, that's what they kept telling us. Oh, there's not going to be any tech problems anymore. They tell us this every time. And of course, they had problems with getting people in queue to speak. They had problems with voting. And as soon as some of these old problems came back up, it was really evident that our new vice mayor is going to have to learn to keep a little bit of a calmer demeanor. She had I'm not trying to be too hard on her. I wouldn't be so hard on her, except for she was very, very hard on Jim Schulman. And she just has a little bit, I would call it, if I was going to call it anything, short fuse, like a little bit of a little bit of an attitude. But it was kind of comforting and funny to see all the tech issues and other predictable issues that we usually see in Metro City Council. And we were joking, a few people online were joking back and forth about how maybe it's never been the tech department's fault ever, like the tech issues, that maybe it's just user error. And it's the council members who just don't know how to use the technology, which I think is totally possible and hilarious and totally fine. I mean, I'm not very tech savvy myself, so I'm not here to judge, but it does lend itself to a little bit of side humor, especially from the peanut gallery people like myself who are watching from the sidelines. So Freddie O'Connell, the new mayor, he came and gave a speech. He addressed the council. He congratulated them on their victory and now telling them that now there's work to be done. He jested with them as well about the fact that he isn't going to miss having to stay there until the end of the meeting. The meetings notoriously go late, or at least they did during the last council body from 2019 until the recent, when we just switched over this year, and they tend to go until 10, 11, 12. They've been going until like 1 a.m. I'm sure even earlier in the morning than that. So he joked with them and also was very humble in his speech about serving the community, wanting to create this consumer-based government and straighten some of the technology out. But he also brought up his 15 fixes. So Fix It Freddy, my editor today came up with that. Fix It Freddy, he had 15 fixes that he outlined while he was on the campaign trail. And he didn't necessarily run on these 15 fixes, but you should certainly look into them. They're on his campaign website, and it'll give you some insight because he seems to be very serious about pursuing these 15 fixes. Sometimes we see a lot of lip service on the campaign trail, promises, blah, 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 blah. We've seen it happen a million times, but they don't necessarily always follow through with what they say. It sounds like Freddie O'Connell is going to follow through with these policies. These are some very progressive policies. They have a lot to do with transit. They have a lot to do with technology. He's a tech guy, y'all. So I don't want to call him maybe a technocrat, perhaps, but he's also very progressive, is a walk, bike, bus Nashville person. We're seeing that come out with some of the conversations he's already having. He's very heavy on the bus. He's really pushing the buses with all of his speeches and his Twitter. So of these 15 fixes, I do want to point one out that's really interesting because I think it could potentially turn into somewhat of a controversial topic. It is about his 100% solar policy, trying to convert in the next 3 years all metro buildings to 100% solar energy. Now, I don't think that there's anybody out there who would argue against wanting sustainable, renewable, clean energy. I think that despite what everybody says in the headlines, there's not a really controversy surrounding that. I think it comes down to when there is different companies trying to monopolize a market, push and close down another market, doing things that are a little untoward, not delivering. So I want to bring something up about solar energy in Tennessee, because we saw something really egregious happen. I think it was 2 years ago. I wasn't planning on talking about this. So if I get a few of the details incorrect, I will come back and correct them. But it was something called Pink Energy. There was a company called Pink Energy. They had solar panels that they sold people here in Middle Tennessee, and I think probably across the state and in other states. And basically, their panels were breaking down. They weren't delivering on the promises that they said, this will cut your bill in half, or you won't even pay, whatever the promises that they made with these solar panels. And basically, they went bankrupt, disappeared, didn't tell their customers. Customers were left with these. One customer was like, I'm left with this oversized paperweight on my roof. I don't know how to remove it. I don't have anybody to contact. And so it just shows you that when innovation hasn't caught up to the incentives, right, with the incentives to get things like that out there, then sometimes that's going to lead to things like what happened with Pink Energy, which is that they can't sustain themselves. It doesn't really work out. This is when the free market works, when innovation actually meets, it meets the need of the community. And there is a desire for clean energy. There is a desire to have renewable energy. But if the technology isn't there, pushing it into existence doesn't create the innovation. They think it does, but it clearly is not happening, not with companies like Pink Energy. So when you hear that a mayor of a major city is now going to try to convert every metro building to solar, right, within the next 3 years, that's ambitious. That's ambitious. And so that's one of his 15 fixes. You guys should go on, like I said, to his website, his campaign website, check out the rest of them. But let me make sure I got my sound going okay. I can't fix this. I am trying to get my interface for my microphone fixed. So we're getting there, y'all. But we're switching gears. We're going to talk about the most contentious part of the Metro Council meeting on Tuesday night, which was a resolution to pass to accept grant funding from the state for SROs in high schools and middle schools. Here's the thing. Let me lay the foundation here. It was laid out actually very clearly by one of the more conservative leaning, I wouldn't call her like the conservative, but definitely more common sense, moderate on the council. Her name is Courtney Johnston. She laid it out perfectly clear that I'll give you her quote here. She informed the council and honestly everybody who was kind of watching that the saying no to the grant money from the state to fund these SROs and MNPS schools doesn't get rid of SROs. Like saying no to the grant doesn't get rid of SROs in schools. saying yes to the grant doesn't add any SROs to the schools. This $3.4 million SRO grant just covers the cost of SRO officers that are already working in MNPS schools. Okay. So she then goes on to explain that basically rejecting the money from the state is not about saying no to this funding. This is her quote, just puts the entire financial burden on Metro taxpayers. There's going to be 2 SROs in every high school and 1 SRO in every middle school, no matter what. This is about who is going to pay for it. So there was a lot of hemming and hawing and back and forth about whether or not Metro should pass this resolution and accept this grant money from the state. Of course, this is a contentious topic. We'll talk about the backstory of this for a little while after I finish what happened. But basically, they wanted a little bit more time, which is understandable. They wanted more time to get some of their questions answered. And once they found out that taking a little bit more time wasn't going to put them in the hot seat, lots of times grants have deadlines. So they figured out that it's not going to prevent them from being able to get the grant money, that if they delay for one more meeting and get the answers that they want, that it'll still fall within the deadline of applying for the money. So they decide to defer this. And they also decide to refer this resolution to committee so that they could ask some more questions, get those answered, and go into the next meeting in 2 weeks and feel more comfortable voting on this money. Now, let's talk about the controversy behind this. If you don't recall, this was another one of those fights between the state and the city, of course, but it had more to do with MNPS. And then, of course, Chief Drake got reeled into it for some reason. Well, I kind of know what reasons, but basically Director Battle, who is the director of MNPS schools, has come out often, but also in the past and now in the present, against SROs, these student resource officers in elementary schools. Okay. So she says it criminalizes childhood behavior. This is her statement that she's made to Fox 17. She's also said things like, when there is a presence of SROs, do we see a spike in arrests or incidents with students? There's also a concern with armed officers being in the same space as our students. And so Director Battle has an issue with SROs in schools. And this is really controversial given the fact that we had the Covenant shooting, and these were initiatives taken to get SRO officers in every school, especially elementary schools where children are very vulnerable. And MNPS just said, we don't want your money. We don't want your SROs. We don't want your money. Well, then Chief Drake, who is MNPD's, the police chief here, he came out and basically on the behalf of the schools rejected the money for elementary SRO officers because he's like, we don't have enough MNPD police officers to be able to even farm for SRO officers for elementary schools. Okay, so basically and in the end, and we tried to get to the bottom of this, but he basically took the heat instead of it coming down on MNPS as rejecting the money. He came out and rejected the money, which is a very confusing thing because when this all rolled out, it was made pretty clear that it was the schools who would have the choice of whether or not they want to accept this grant money and try to get an SRO officer into their schools. So the chief of police coming out and rejecting the money instead of the director herself coming out and rejecting the money was super controversial at the time and is still a little bit suspect. And I'm going to explain a little bit more of what else happened during Metro City Council meeting. So that's a little bit of the backstory. The SROs not wanting them in elementary schools. It turns out that there are already SRO officers in middle and high schools. And basically this resolution was going to pay for almost all of their salary for these SRO officers in schools. So it's kind of silly that the Metro City Council is hemming and hawing over whether they should accept this money. We're going to be paying for it anyways. So why wouldn't you accept the state money to cover part of the bill instead of burdening the taxpayers of Davidson County with the bill? So that being said, while there was discussion on the floor, and I'm not really sure how many people caught it, but I wanted to expand on it a little bit today during this podcast, is that some of the questions had to do with, hey, we just don't really understand we just want some more information about what this really means, like what this means for SRO officers in schools. But then some of the council members were wondering why, hold on, looking at the sound again. There we go. Some of the council members were wondering why exactly they were making the decision on the behalf of MNPS schools, why they were just writ large accepting this money for all of the schools in MNPS instead of each school deciding for themselves if they want to accept this grant money. And this is super interesting to me because they wanted that question answered. They want to say, why are we making this decision? Why is the council making this decision for writ large for all the schools? Why aren't each school making their own decisions? Well, that brings up a really important topic because the argument of when Chief Drake came out and rejected the money was, why are you rejecting the money? Why aren't the schools the ones making the decisions for themselves? And they're like, well, it's because we're the ones who would have to provide the officers, so it's our decision. Well, now we'll see what happens as far as these answers that they come up with. Now that we're going to see another committee meeting, we're going to hear from Chief Drake. Hopefully we'll hear from MNPS, somebody who is a representative from over there. And we'll see exactly why it is that writ large Metro is making the decision on the behalf of all the schools and why they have to even vote on this to accept the grant money. So that's really interesting. We're gonna watch that as that unfolds coming up at the second half of this month. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about that happened during the council meeting was, there was a lot of council is hard to watch because I don't want to say it's boring, but it's boring. It's very boring. It takes a long time to get through things, but you have to remember they are using Robert's rules. And so, one, if you don't understand how the rules go, it can be a little bit confusing. Like you don't really understand what's going on or why something happened or why somebody wasn't allowed to speak or why somebody was cut off or why a bill just all of a sudden was pulled off of the lineup or why didn't we talk about why didn't we talk about that bill? Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? Well, it's because there is a rule. There are Robert's rules that we follow. There are other rules that people can invoke that have been decided on, like the actual charter rules that the council decides on and makes. This stuff isn't really as much about gatekeeping as that if it's not your normal mode of operation, you've never really done anything where you've had to use Robert's rules or anything like that, it's confusing. But I will say this, if you're somebody who wants to get to know what is going on, right now is a really great time to start tuning into council because half the council are newbies. And these new people, they don't know what's going on either. So they ask a lot of questions that you might be thinking to yourself in your own head, like, what just happened? Or what do I have to do to go back to the previous question? Or what did that even mean? What just happened? A lot of those questions were asked on the floor during the first meeting from different council members because these council members are new and they don't know how everything works yet. So if you're trying to learn how it works, now's a great time to tune in because people are asking on the floor the questions that you might be thinking in your head. That being said, you don't have to tune in. And I am wondering a little bit, I've done podcasts in the past where I've explained a little bit of how the council works. And I am thinking about maybe perhaps putting out a one sheet. And if you guys are interested in a one sheet that explains the process of not only how a bill becomes a law in Metro government, but also how the committee process works, how referrals work, how all this stuff kind of works. If you're interested in something like that, leave me a comment in the comment section or hit me up on Twitter or somewhere because I do think that once it gets more fun once you learn what's going on, because then you can actually follow along and then you get to know the personalities of the people who are in the council. And there's a lot of stuff going on at once because there are 40 different politicians sitting there advocating on the behalf of their community. They're also being lobbied by lobbyists. They're also being thrown a lot of different ideas and they have to prioritize those ideas. And then there's like some rifts between council members and underlying drama. And you, of course, have the people in the gallery who are there for their interests, whether it be something that they're advocating for or they're with a nonprofit. And so then you start to enjoy what is kind of like the circus of Metro city government. Until then, it can be extremely confusing. So I hope that you just keep coming back to Nashville Savvy if you want the wrap up. But I would love a few more people who tune in with me and go back and forth with me on Twitter while we're live watching it live every other Tuesday night when they meet for Metro City Council. So please join me if you are more interested, and hit me up with any questions if you want to get into it. But we're going to switch gears. I know that was a longer talk than I usually take for Metro City Council, but we're going to switch gears and we're going to go to local corner. I can't remember. Do we have local corner? All right, we do have the audio for that one. See, I'm still getting used to whether or not we have audio for the transitions. So my nerd might be showing with this local corner today, guys. I'm sorry. But this week I found out that, the Nashville Tree Foundation, they're doing a sapling drive. They're doing a tree adopt-a-thon thing all through October. So they're giving out saplings to people who want to plant a tree, for free, which is really awesome. And you should go to NashvilleTreeFoundation.org and check that out if you're interested in getting a tree. Of course, until I have my own big backyard, I can't do that, but I think it's a great idea. I love it. But when I was on their website looking into it, they have something called the Big Old Tree Contest, where they took submissions. Now the submission process is over, guys. I'm sorry. If you have a big old tree, you can't submit it anymore because they already took the submissions for this year. They're going to be announcing this year's winner on November 5th. But that's not the dorky thing. When I was looking at the Big Old Tree Contest and I clicked on their information, this is again on NashvilleTreeFoundation.org, they provide a detailed map of all the past Big Old Tree winners across Nashville. So if you want to, while you're experiencing your fall foliage this autumn, we're in October. I've committed to autumn now. Even though sometimes it's like still 85 degrees outside. But if you want to visit some of these big old trees, which might be creepy because they're in neighborhoods and stuff, but I love a big old tree. You can go to their website. They don't only give you a full map of where every single one of these winners is. They also give a full description of the tree. So how high it is, the width of its canopy, and obviously what tree, what do you call it? A tree species? Somebody help me out here. What kind of tree it is. And so I really nerded out looking at I picked out some of the biggest trees that won, and I'm putting it on my list as I go throughout Nashville, taking in the fall foliage. I'm going to visit some of these big old trees because, man, it is sad when, especially when the tornadoes came through here and they rip up a lot of those old trees. Sometimes in some neighborhoods, you really don't have a lot of those big old trees anymore because they all gone. So I love a big old tree. That's my dorky local corner for today. And the last thing we're going to go into is, of course, Metro Mayhem. Metro Mayhem. Gosh. So okay. I don't feel bad about this one, but it's not really chaotic as much as it's just a continuation of our discussion last week from some of the TikTok things that happened that I was making judgments on. We have people in our Metro City Council who are participating in asking people to join TikTok, and they are trying to make council members more accessible and more relatable. And half of me is like, obviously it's totally fine trying to help people know who their council members are. That's great. But there's a lot of stuff going on here in Nashville, and there's a lot to be done. And the fact of the matter is, these people are the ones who represent you and are the ones who make the budget and are the ones who accept grant money and are the ones who create policies that our city will carry out in order to protect us, take care of our safety, make decisions about education, about our children, about opportunities for the city, who's going to be allowed to thrive in the city, basically based off of some of these decisions that the Metro City Council makes. So sometimes these things feel so unserious. And I think that there would be, I would have a little bit more forgiveness in my heart if people weren't coming to council and being like, I haven't read Robert's rules yet. Like, excuse me? You just got elected into this office and you haven't read Robert's rules of order so that, kind of at least know what's going on. That's a little bit concerning. These people are in charge. So there was a lot of joking, a lot of clamor, and a lot of clapping, as usual during this first council meeting. Now, usually in the old council, that was frowned upon. You keep the chamber quiet. You're not allowed to cheer for people in the cheering section. Okay. That's not really appropriate for the government work that's being done in there. And it can be really intimidating, especially if you're somebody there who comes to, stand up and say something on the behalf of something that you're advocating for, something that you'd like to see in your neighborhood. And there's a whole section of people who are there for opposing reasons. It can be very intimidating. And that's not the type of environment that that in the old council was really encouraged. They really tried to dampen down the peanut gallery, so to speak. That wasn't so much the case this first meeting. So Angie Henderson's going to be setting the tone. I'm not sure where it's going to go. But I will say that there were some jokes on the floor. I'm all about a good joke. But then they started to talk about karaoke. And then they asked Sandra Sepulveda if she wanted to participate in karaoke. And then it just feels so unserious. And it's not that I'm asking them to be dour. It's that I'm asking them to be professional and not hypocritical and to take things seriously. But it would be a lot more forgivable if it felt like they were taking things seriously. And perhaps that's something that they're not going to change it unless they get pushback from their own council members. So something to pay attention to, something that I'm going to put in my category of Metro Mayhem today, because again, I'm just a hater. I'm a hater who hates, apparently. But yes, so that was our first Metro City Council meeting. Thank you guys for those who joined us live. We'll be back here next week, and I'll be bringing up a few questions. I'm going to be going on a little bit of a trip throughout some of our southern cities, and I'll want some feedback from y'all if you want me to take you along with me at all as I travel through places like Savannah and Charleston and such. So you'll have to let me know in the comment section when I address that next week. But besides that, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the flip side.